What's up, guys? It's Collin. Today we're working back in the sales department, and today's topic is all about fish compatibility. So when we talk about fish compatibility, there's really three main categories. So firstly, there's our friendly fish, or we would call those community fish. There's our semi-aggressive, which is in between that community level and aggressive, and then our last category is our aggressive fish. So first off, let's talk about what we would consider a community fish. So a community fish would typically be something that gets along well with others, or gets along well in what we would call a mixed species tank, meaning there's many different types of fish in that tank. Great examples of these would be platies, guppies, mollies, other live-bearing fish like swordtails and endlers, things like that. A lot of your other different fish that would fall into this category would be corydoras, small plecos like different bristlenose, smaller species of pleco, under that 5-inch mark, and then many other different species would fall into this community category. The second category would be our semi-aggressive category. There's a lot of different fish that fall into this category, and just because there are these categories doesn't mean that they're mutually exclusive. So good examples for our semi-aggressive fish, or these fish have the capability they can be a little bit of jerks. So they're known for fin nipping, biting, chasing other fish down, things like that. They're especially prone to going after fish that are really slow, or they have long flashy fins like bettas and things like that. So great examples of a semi-aggressive fish would be like most of your barbs, including your tiger barbs, your tetras, and things like that. Some of your eels and some of your other fish like ghost knife, clown knife will all come into this category. Not to say that you can't keep semi-aggressive fish with community fish, but you're definitely going to have to keep a lot closer eye on these types of fish. More examples would be like spiny eels, tire track eels, bichers, or what they call dinosaur fish. These all generally can get along with community fish, but there are certain exceptions. So for example, it's going to be dependent on factors like tank size. If you have a very small tank, in most situations, that's not going to work. You can generally diffuse aggression and predation with a larger system or a larger tank. The second thing would be size compatibility. So obviously when our little polypterus or dinosaur fish are really small, generally they're not much of a threat to other fish. However, keep in mind eventually with some of those semi-aggressive species, anything that can fit in its mouth is definitely going to be a target. Fish that would maybe go good with semi-aggressive fish would be fast-moving and short-finned fish, so like other tetras, barbs, and things like that. So for example, I generally don't advise it, but like for example with red belly piranhas, a lot of people will actually keep ruby barbs or tiger barbs in schools with them, but you have to have a very large tank. So again, a lot of these things are on a very case-by-case basis, and you're just going to have to evaluate that individually. Our third category would be our aggressive fish. So these are all going to be things like our large predatory fish, like our arowana, your peacock bass, for example, your electric catfish down here. We already mentioned piranhas, of course, and then our African and our South American cichlids. So our African cichlids, any of your mbunas and your peacocks and all those different types, and your Tanganyikan cichlids, and then of course your South Americans like your Oscars, your Jack Dempseys, things like that. Those are all going to be what we call aggressive. And so with those types of fish, generally it's going to be species specific, and with a lot of those, and also I would consider the red-tailed cat in there as well, so larger South American catfish. With those, eventually you're going to have to be prepared for the fact that most likely you're going to have that fish in a tank by itself, simply because it's either going to kill its tank mates or bully all of its different tank mates. So another tidbit would be that when if you're deciding to choose a plecostomus for your tank, there are considerations you're going to have to deal with as well. So many people don't realize this, but in general, most species of plecostomus, including the commons, which is the one that gets super large, those are actually super territorial. So in many systems, if you get two of those, they're going to outcompete each other for food, or they're going to fight for territory. So they are actually aggressive. The only exception to this would be if you have a really, really large tank, or another good option is if you have a smaller tank but are looking for more of a community-oriented plecostomus. I always recommend the Ancestris genus, which is all your bristlenoses, so your super reds, your albinos, your Lemonade and your like Starlights. Those are all super compatible, with the exception being if you want to have more than one male, you're just going to have a lot more space. So that would be a good option for you if you want to have multiple plecos in your tank or a community pleco tank. I would definitely recommend some sort of bristlenose in there. Two more categories of animals you might commonly find in your aquarium would be invertebrates and amphibians. So with our shrimp and our crayfish here, most of these guys I do recommend, especially with the Neocardinia, having in a species-specific tank. Meaning if you're going to have shrimp, generally they're most successful in a shrimp-only tank. However, I have seen a lot of my customers keep these with quote-unquote microfish, like scarlet batis and other small fish, and that can be pretty successful in a smaller system. One more consideration would be that with some of your crayfish as well, those guys can be territorial, so you're going to want to make sure you either have plenty of hiding spaces in space or that you generally don't have multiple males. That's mainly more of an issue with the larger species of crayfish that we don't often carry, but with the shrimp, generally they're friendly and community oriented. Our next category would be our amphibians, so that's going to be like our clawed frogs and our dwarf clawed frogs. Now on the dwarf clawed frogs, those guys being smaller, getting about 2 inches max, those generally are fine as a community fish, but when our normal African clawed frog, these guys can actually get about the size of a softball. So anything that can fit in their mouth when they're of size is free game. These guys are also really known for like chasing after fish, and you know, you don't want to wake up with one of your fish missing half of its fins or being eaten by a frog overnight. So keep in mind, if you get these, be sure to make sure it's a actual dwarf clawed frog, because these guys do get about the size of a softball. Eventually they'll need a tank basically their own size. So one more factor, when you are considering adding a new fish to your tank, I would always recommend asking an associate for personal advice. There's some good examples of this. So firstly, there's certain fish like leopard danios and zebra danios and things like that, that they are labeled as quote-unquote community. However, in my personal experience and a lot of our experience here at the store, they're actually very notorious for being fin nippers, especially if you were to try to put a betta or something like that in the tank. We've put a betta in a tank with, you know, leopard danios before, and then they really like to pick on those kind of fish. So you just really have to watch it and just judge it on a case-by-case basis. And that could be one thing, you know, even if it has a quote-unquote green tag, it's not going to work out. So if you ever come in our store, you might have seen these in previous fish videos, but most of our tags have a rating system. Green is community, yellow would be semi-aggressive like our rams here, and then red would mean it's basically aggressive, so you wouldn't want to put anything with it, just like our electric cat. Now the electric cat doesn't get too large, but at night those guys like to patrol the tank and they can give off random electrical discharges, and so obviously that doesn't work for most fish. If you have any questions about fish compatibility, be sure to message us or ask an associate in store.